G'day, this is Michael Tesaro, and I'm back doing these cheat sheets. I've fallen behind again. As you can see, it's September. I'm doing the July one. Fortunately, July is not a super busy month, and I'll be able to catch up and do August shortly and then be back on track. For people who don't know what this is all about, it's effectively a summary of what's been happening in relation to the ACCC in July. So you can just listen to this and quickly cheat your way through to knowing everything that happened in that particular month. Couldn't help using that particular image. It's very well known a couple of months ago, and some cheaters who got caught out. Okay, so background about myself. I'm a competition and consumer lawyer, and I've been running my own practice to sale legal consulting for 18 years now, and I help companies, individuals with competition and consumer law matters. Also do expert consultancy work for various legal publishers about competition consumer law, and have a part-time role at NCAT where I do a variety of different types of cases. But the ones probably relevant here, I do consumer claims, so I get some real life experience doing those cases. Also, prior to that, I worked at the ACCC 15 years in a variety of roles. I ran one of the enforcement teams in Sydney for a number of years, and also ran the Sydney Mergers and Asset Sales branch. Now, outlined, there wasn't a whole lot in courts and enforcement, a bit of merger activity, interesting scam announcement, product safety announcement, not much in the authorisations area, or the inquiries and consultations area. There was one other, which was a speech by Jenny Cascott-Lee at the ABA conference. Now, the first and only case in July was ACCC and Webjet marketing. And here was a case where the ACCC alleged effectively that Webjet was making misleading representations about the price of its flights when including the whole amounts that were payable by a consumer. There were some compulsory fees. So it's drip pricing effectively. But there's also some other specific conduct that related to 118 consumers, which is probably a test group. It's probably not everybody impacted. But there they were saying that these consumers were told by Webjet that they were that their flights had been confirmed when it wasn't actually the case. And then they later asked these particular consumers for additional payment. So you think if your payment, your flight's confirmed and your travel arrangements were confirmed, you don't have to pay anything more. So that was quite problematic conduct. Not sure how it arose. As you can see, the drip pricing was there for a few years, and this conduct in relation to these particular consumers was also for a 5-year period. So with the consumers, they've refunded these consumers the additional amounts they paid. And I guess they're the types of ads when you see flights to a particular place, $18 with an asterisk, then there can't be any additional costs associated with that ticket. If there are, the 18%, doesn't matter how many asterisks you got there, is going to be misleading. And you see a lot of asterisks there on the right. So you're saying $100, $150, $200. This is well known to be misleading conduct. You can't effectively entice somebody with a low headline price and then add on additional charges that are compulsory and that you know what they are. You know what the charges are. You've got to tell the consumers up front. One big enforcement action in July, and this was against company Edgewell Personal Care Australia plus its US parent company, and this relates to the representations that particular sunscreens were reef friendly, and they're quite well-known brands, Hawaiian, Tropic and Banana Boat. And so what ACCC has alleged is that Edgewell were claiming that their sunscreens were reef friendly because they didn't have a couple of chemicals that weren't good for reefs. Oxybenzone and the other one I'm not too oxytonate. So they didn't have those two particular chemicals. And these chemicals have been banned in a number of jurisdictions because they damage reefs. But what the ACCC has alleged is these sunscreens actually have all these other chemicals in them, which the ACCC alleges are damaging to reefs, coral, marine life, and so on. So effectively, the ACCC is saying, well, you can't say it doesn't have two chemicals which damage reefs, but then leave out reference to any of these other ones. So it's an important case for a couple of reasons. I guess firstly, as you can see, ACCC alleges it applies to more than 490 Edgewell sunscreen products, which is a lot of products. The other thing is everybody else doing the same thing? I don't really know whether these representations about reef friendly are very common in the market, but if they are, there's going to be a lot of other companies that have to change their advertising. The thing that was interesting here is that in the ACCC press release, it mentions the fact that the US parent company removed these representations from its products which it was selling in the US. So that's a very bad look, if you're sort of saying, well, we can't sustain this representation in the US, we better get rid of it, but then not removing it in another jurisdiction, it makes it look quite intentional that you wanted to get an advantage from making these representations. Here is an example. This was from the ACCC press release, and as you can see down the left-hand side there's the representation. On the right, it's blown up, and they're drawing attention to the fact it doesn't have those particular chemicals in it. It says it's reef friendly. Now, there's a lot of mergers in this particular month in July, and the interesting thing was there were a couple of them where the ACCC initially formed a view that they had concerns. So in the preliminary statements of issues, they said, yeah, we've got some concerns about this merger for a variety of reasons. But then when they went in and did their investigation, spoke to market participants, they concluded there weren't issues at all. So it shows the ACCC very open-minded in the way it does things. Maybe a slightly bit more permissive than in the past. So I'm not sure that's quite right yet, but I think it's headed that way. So the first merger, 4th of July, the ACCC issued an announcement or made an announcement that it didn't have any concerns with the DP World Silk Logistics merger. And this was a vertical integration type concern initially because DP World, they run ports, stevedoring operations, and Silk Logistics is downstream company, trucking and other delivery logistics. So the concern was whether DP World might sort of discriminate in favour of its downstream operator and against downstream competitors. So the ACCC concluded after doing an investigation that that wouldn't be likely. And that analysis is quite interesting because they're sort of saying, well, DP World wouldn't engage in particular forms of discriminatory conduct which would materially impact its upstream operations. So why would it do something to advantage itself downstream if that was going to interfere with the operation of its terminals? That would be irrational. Also, they concluded in the last paragraph, a reduction in the ability to efficiently process containers at its terminals would have problems in terms of DP World potentially losing shipping lines. You go, well, we don't really want to be using DP World. There's too much inefficiency there. We'll move to another competitor. So they've concluded that some of the more likely anti-competitive conduct that DP World may be tempted to engage in would not be rational because it would just adversely impact its upstream business. Don't know if I entirely agree with that because there's plenty of ways an upstream player could advantage a downstream subsidiary which wouldn't interfere with the operational efficiency of its upstream business. For example, you might let the Silk Logistics trucks in for free, or you might give them the best slots, in the morning as opposed to in the afternoon. Lots of things you could do that wouldn't adversely impact your efficiency. So I'm not too sure the ACCC took the right approach on that, but anyway, it's been let through and no undertaking. The next one was Cleanaway and Contract Resources Group, and this is another one the ACCC expressed some concerns about, and you can understand why, because obviously this is just classic high barriers to entry markets. There's environmental planning, there's lots of high barriers to entry which make it very difficult to get into these markets. But on the 4th of July, they announced they weren't going to oppose the merger and weren't going to seek any undertakings either. And this is, they looked at the merged entity would be able to profitably leverage Contract Resources' strong position in the supply of specialist industrial services. So effectively, the two companies do slightly different work. Contract Resources is a more specialist provider of certain services, and whether they can sort of use that new capability to advantage themselves unfairly. So I guess bundling, requiring customers to acquire both services together and therefore excluding other competitors. And the ACCC concluded that this was unlikely to be a profitable strategy because customers have other options. So it doesn't matter if the barriers are high, there are other competitors in the market that can provide the relevant services. So again, I think these two cases just suggest to me the ACCC may be becoming a little bit more a little bit more laissez-faire with his approach to mergers, particularly after initially expressing concerns about both these mergers and then letting them through without undertakings. Lactalis Fonterra. Now, this is another market that's fairly concentrated, and the ACCC announced it would not oppose Lactalis' proposed acquisition of not the whole of Fonterra, but its consumer, dairy ingredients, and food services business. So, selling a part of the business, I guess. The part of the business probably there's more competition in. Obviously, Fonterra competes with a lot of different companies in terms of supplying consumer goods, food service goods, dairy ingredients. So the ACCC found across the relevant Gippsland, Murray and Western Victoria area, there'd be alternative buyers of raw milk. So there's competitors who can buy the farmer's milk. And obviously that's a concern about monopoly power, like buying power. And this also, the ACCC concluded the transaction was unlikely to substantiate lessen competition in the wholesale supply of dairy products. So there they believe there's enough other competitors at that manufacturing wholesale level to maintain competition in relation to drinking milk, cream, cheese, yellow spreads, etc. So again, a merger which on first blush you might think that sounds problematic. ACCC had a detailed look at it and concluded no issues, no undertakings either necessary. Then this is one they expressed concern about. It's not too sure how to pronounce it. Acciona and East Rockingham Waste Energy Project. And this is in WA. And what happened here was that effectively East Rockingham Waste Energy Project is in financial trouble. It's currently in administration receivership. And so this other company wants to buy it out, but the ACCC is concerned about that. They have expressed a view that they believe this merger or this acquisition will remove competition between these two waste providers who are the only waste to energy facility providers in Perth and Peel regions. And they also believe that it would be likely to substantially lessen competition in the supply of putrescible waste disposal services in the region. So there's two things. Obviously, waste to energy is part of it, but the other one that's probably more of a concern is putrescible waste disposal. And the market feedback received by the ACCC has identified that the two facilities are very close competitors. Now, the problem here you've got is the target is in administration receivership and this assets might exit the market. Sometimes the ACCC thinks it's better that the kid exits the market and be picked up by a new player or something like that. So it'd be interesting here. They must be running a pretty strong funding firm argument. But it's hard to see these assets, which sound pretty specialised, would just exit the market and get used for something else. They're going to stay in the market, you would assume. Then Omnicom and Interpublic Group, and this was a merger in 17th July, would not be opposed by the ACCC. And these two companies were very large multinational suppliers of advertising, media and communication services. They also provide media buying and marketing services. They're very integrated, they do lots of stuff. And the agency concluded that this particular merger wasn't going to reduce competition because there's other competitors in the market who can keep these two guys from exercising market power. And they mentioned a few there, very large companies, WPP, Publicis and Dentsu. So they're very large companies. So if these particular players decided to try and use their power in terms of the supply or even the buying of media services, then they'd be constrained by these competitors. Now, the next one is ghost stores, and I think ghost stores is generally a description of a particular type of store. It's a ghost store or operators of websites allegedly misrepresenting themselves as local businesses. I think you probably get rid of allegedly there. They're ghost stores, they pretend to be local stores when they're not. And what's happened here is ACCC issued public warning notices against 4 of these particular ghost stores. So it hasn't used the public warning notice very much, but they did issue 4 of them in this particular case. And I don't know if these 4 companies are associated in any way. But what the ACCC alleged in their warning notices is that these ghost store operators were harming consumers by making false representations that they are local Australian businesses, imminently closing down and selling high quality clothing and footwear products when they're actually based overseas. They're not closing down and they're drop shipping low quality products. So drop shipping is when you just take an order and then some third party company provides the product, but they're representing the products are top quality and then the products that people are getting are very low quality. That's what's been alleged. So it issued 4 public warning notices to say to people, stay away from these 4 traders. So Everly, Melbourne Com, Willow and Grace, Adelaide, Sophie Claire Com, and Double Bay Boutique. And they've actually put in their websites in the press release so you can see them. I imagine they've probably changed by now. But they look pretty good, don't they, these websites? They look pretty professional. They look high-end products, and these other ones here, and obviously closing down sales. So I think the ACCC probably knows a lot more about the people behind these stores that may have been disclosed in the particular media release. Now, power banks, there was a warning put out about power banks, and there have been a large number of power banks that have been recalled over the last few months. And effectively, there have been 17 different power banks recalled since 2020, but that's really escalated in the last 16 months. 16 have been recalled. And they're really concerned that these particular power banks are very unsafe, that they're basically wireless power banks, which could catch fire, burn down people's houses, or could cause injury to individuals who tried to grab them and they set on fire. So effectively, they're warning people, and they've got a number of the products uh, attached to the media release. I guess the main thing here is to just, when you're buying a power bank, check on the product safety website to make sure you're not buying them, buying one that's been recalled. I've got to say that these aren't very well-known brands. So if you're buying a top brand, you probably don't have to worry too much, but it might be sensible just to check it anyway. Then authorization. This is one that the ACCC foreshadowed some time ago that it was going to let through, and so it's issued the final determination granting authorization to the Australian Sustainable Finance Institute. And effectively, this is a group of companies that want to get together to exchange information to try and, I guess, fund various sustainable initiatives. So these are competitors who will be able to talk, to exchange confidential information, obviously data about financial decision making, designing investment instructions, giving effect to these particular products, and even developing regulatory reform proposals. So they can do all that together without any risk of getting accused of being in a cartel. And the ACCC thinks there's a lot of public benefit here, probably quite a bit of detriment too when you think about it, because this could slip into cartel conduct fairly easily. But obviously the ACCC thinks the public benefits arising from this are quite high. There'll be reporting requirements to make sure there's no funny business. So the collaborative conduct aims to facilitate the development of sustainable farming practices, exports, sustainable exports, and reducing emissions. So it's got some pretty big goals in mind. Cyclone reinsurance pool. This was set up by the government some time ago because basically the reinsurance pool in particularly northern Australia was not very competitive, very expensive. A lot of people were opting not to buy insurance at all because it was just too expensive. Not very many providers. So ACCC decided to set up a reinsurance pool, and what the ACCC does is reports on how that pool is going. And so I think this is the 4th insurance monitoring report, and it found that things are going pretty well, that this pool has successfully lowered insurance premiums for customers who are facing medium to high risk of cyclones. So that's, that's Queensland, northern Australia. The report found that average home and contents insurance premiums as measured on a $100,000 sum basis in these higher risk areas decreased 11% compared to premiums before the reinsurance pool took effect. So that's positive. They're paying less, and if people are paying less, they're more likely to buy it. So if the costs go down, people are more likely to cover their risk. However, it did find that the pool on strata insurance was less pronounced, but still okay. But it's not going down as much. It found 7% reduction in the average strata insurance premium in these areas. So bigger for, individual consumer insurance premiums, but not so good for stratas. However, noting that, there were some concerns as well. Despite the pool leading to falls for some consumers, the price of home and strata insurance across Australia is generally high and rising. So generally these insurance amounts outside these high-risk areas is going upwards. And that's something you've got to sort of wonder what's going on there. Is there is there a reason for that? There was some reference to materials being difficult to obtain, building materials and other factors, but I guess you want to explore the reasons for that. Maybe the ACCC wants its mandate expanded a bit to look into that. Remains limited appetite for new insurers to come into the market, so the government's trying to make the environment more favourable so those companies come in, and it doesn't seem to have worked. The final thing is, it's important to encourage consumers to take, steps to mitigate their risk, and if they mitigate their risk, then the policy premiums will go down. And the ACCC wasn't very impressed with the level of communication and the marketing of these mitigation options by the insurance companies. They're not actually helping consumers to mitigate risk and thus lower their policies. I guess it's a bit of extra work for them, but something that when this pool was set up was part of the agreement that was going to be done. Then the final thing was Gina Gottlieb gave the keynote speech at the ABA Banking Conference, and she discussed a number of issues. Obviously, the biggie is protecting consumers from scams. That's taken on a whole new level of importance, not just across the ACCC, but across the Australian economy, across financial providers. A lot of these cells are being formed to deal with specific financial issues. And I think we're catching up with the rest of the world on a lot of this stuff. We weren't really very on the front foot with it. CDR and digital identity. Well, obviously digital identity, we're aware of that, MyGovID and all this two-factor authentication and all that sort of stuff, but also the consumer data right, the need to really keep pushing reforms along in that area. The current government's sort of put a bit of a hold on it, but hopefully they'll get back onto the program and start pushing it through because it's very important and it will improve competition in many different industries. Talking about innovation, resilience, sustainability, a lot of this refers to digital platforms and these payment mechanisms that they've set up. They're really very competitive. Other ways of trying to be innovative in this particular space. And I guess the sustainability issue, it's mentioned at the end there, sustainability collaboration. So the sustainability collaboration, which the ACCC authorised. So that's all part of it. I don't know if we got the most innovative financial sector in the world somehow. There's no reason to really be very innovative, given that it's so concentrated. But clearly, if anybody's going to bring any competition to it, it might be the digital platforms. The role of cash, that's a big problem. As we all know, Armaguard is crying poor, and it looks like their customers are going to have to bail them out. But there's a real problem here with how sustainable is the cash and transit business going forward, and what's going to happen if the business Armaguard falls over, because a lot of businesses really depend on cash. So I'm not too sure, but I think everybody appreciates the importance of cash and the need to keep some business operating in that area. So it wasn't a super busy month. The Webjet case was a big case, $9 million, but it's pretty old type of conduct with pricing. Surprising to see somebody in the travel area doing it, because the first cases were run against like Jetstar and Virgin, people like that. So they would be well aware of it. I don't know what happened there. They went off the rails a bit. Environmental cases, you see a bit of an uptick with the ACCC. They seem to be running more of these, and it took a while to get going, but once they get going, they're going to be running some big ones. This seems like a big one, this one involving the sunscreens, because 90 products, it's a lot of products, and I have a feeling a lot of other players in the market might be making similar representation, so it's probably a pretty big case. I don't know if they'll fight it. If I were them, I don't think I'd fight it. I'd pay a fine and move on. Mergers, very interesting observation with the mergers. ACCC, I don't know if this is a change in personnel there. They've got a relatively new, mergers commissioner, Philip Williams, who I think takes a more, let's say, fair approach on some of these mergers. A couple mergers were identified as having problems initially and then led through without any conditions at all. So I think that highlights ACCC as being probably, a little bit more permissive here. I didn't think the DP World explanation was very credible. I think it's focusing on mechanisms that a company in market power could implement that wouldn't be rational, but it's ignoring the rational things that companies can do to exercise market power. But anyway, I think it's showing a bit of a change there. Interesting case in WA with the waste, whether that's going to get through. It does look like a failing firm. Ghost story is very interesting. Public warning notices is really interesting because I remember I did a talk at a law council workshop years and years ago, and I talked about public warning notices, and I was I don't know, the then chair of the ACCC said my talk was ridiculous because they'd never used this particular power, and I was a little bit gobsmacked because that's not like the ACCC not to use a particular power they're given. So clearly, what he said then many years ago proved it not to be correct. The ACCC has used this power a fair bit, sparingly, but here they've issued 4 public warning notices. And I think it's a good thing. Like they need to issue these warning notices because if they're aware of somebody who may be running a scam, they need to warn consumers before too many people lose their money. And the final issue, the insurance issues, it's sort of good and bad news. I think there's a slight improvement in various markets, but generally insurance markets aren't very competitive. Pricing's going up. Insurers are very risk averse. I don't think further scrutiny of insurance markets would be very welcomed, just to understand if there's any market failures occurring. So that's effectively all I had. It was a quietish month. Hopefully I'll be able to do the next month shortly and be totally up to date. It's a pretty big month, August actually. A couple of big decisions came down, and actually in September is very big as well. So if you do have any questions about any of this, feel free to give us a call or drop me an email. Bye-bye.